So there are a number of Browns players who are under contract for just this year. Tom, let's do extend, wait, or walk. We'll play a little game. Let's begin with Nick Chubb. I'm giving you a layup in the first one. Nick Chubb, extend, wait, or walk.
Well, first of all, you're giving me a lot of power here. I feel really like this is too much for me. If you don't extend Nick Chubb, I don't know what you're thinking or what you've been watching. That is the biggest layup no-brainer of all time. In many ways, while Baker Mayfield might be the face of this franchise, Dave, Nick Chubb embodies what this franchise is all about right now. Hard worker, no nonsense. Give me the ball. Let me do my thing. Extend him for whatever he needs.
Yeah, and it's a guy, not a lot of words, but a whole lot of actions on the football field. And kind of what Kevin Stefanski has been preaching this offseason.
100%. I mean, he leads by example. And, you know, all you hear about Nick Chubb is that he's in the weight room in the offseason. He's putting in his time. He's just the guy. And I think his teammates respect him for how hard he works. And look at the numbers that he's put up in 3 years. It's pretty extraordinary to think that this kid is really just coming into his own.
All right, so let's move on. Right guard Wyatt Teller. We mentioned kind of came from nowhere. What do you think? Extend, wait, walk?
I'm waiting on that one only because, especially with the injury situation, as I mentioned earlier with Wyatt. And listen, I'm not holding that against him because injuries are going to happen. That's just part of football. That's part of sports. But I kind of let things settle down a little bit only because you've got so many other, big deals sitting in front of you, as you've mentioned before, with Denzel Ward and Nick Chubb and Baker Mayfield. I think we can sit a little bit with the offensive guard and figure out what that really looks like.
Yeah, the only thing that would concern you is if he goes out and is, again, like the top guard in the NFL, he could price himself out of what you're able to do.
He could, but you've also shown that, you have an ability to find these kind of guys. And maybe you bring in a young guy that you groom, or maybe that's, maybe next year that's one of your picks is one of the top linemen that's available. So obviously you've had different needs. And listen, credit to Wyatt Teller, man. The guy has worked hard to get where he's gotten, and I'm sure he's going to get a handsome payday at some point. I'm just not ready to give it to him right now.
We'll move on. Rodney Harrison, that's a guy that the Browns traded a later round pick for with the Jaguars. Played well when he finally was on the field and then kind of banged up a little bit. Ronnie Harrison, extending, wait, or walk?
I like Ronnie Harrison a lot, Dave, but I would wait on that one as well. And I think for some of the reasons that we brought up before, which is that you've got some new faces in that secondary. Let's see how they mesh first before we start handing out checks to everybody back there. You've got John Johnson III, as you mentioned before, and Grant Delpit coming back. We really don't exactly know what that back of the secondary is going to look like. So until we do, I would hold off on Ronnie.
So David Njoku, tight end, a guy that you gave the fifth-year option to. This one's got to be a real head scratcher.
Yeah, head scratcher and David Njoku are synonymous at some times, right? We've heard about him, demanding trades or asking for a trade and then falling in line. And listen, this is a former first-round pick who has shown signs of being the player that you thought you were getting when you drafted him. So again, I'm going to wait there, and I think also you have to wait to your point before about, how's this chemistry with Hooper going to grow? Harrison Bryant is a guy we haven't even talked about yet, who I think has tremendous upside. So with Njoku, I would just kind of let's just chill and let things fall into place with him.
And the flip side of it is Njoku, he does have the ridiculous athletic skills that could make him an elite tight end. There's some consistency things that you want to see more of.
Correct. I mean, he's had some drops. It's kind of like it's a show us, David. You've talked about being a good teammate. You've talked about being a big time producer. Show us, and you'll get paid.
So we'll move on. Rashard Higgins. That's a guy that came back on a one-year deal. Has some chemistry with Baker Mayfield that's evident anytime he's on the field. What are you thinking with Rashard Higgins?
Yeah, I think he's a year-to-year guy, Dave. And to me, that's who he is. Listen, good player, like you said before. Made some big plays, made some big catches. Obviously, has some great chemistry with Baker Mayfield. But you also have some young wide receivers on this roster as well that you want to find out more about. Donovan Peoples-Jones is a guy that I think has got tremendous upside. It can kind of maybe take over that role that Higgins has had the last couple of years. And in Anthony Schwartz, you have a third-round pick that you have high hopes for. So, again, I think in Higgins' case, and unfortunately for Richard, I think that's who he is. I think he's like a one-year guy. If he's happy here, you bring him back for another year, and I think that's just going to have to kind of be the way it goes for him.
Offensive lineman Chris Hubbard, another one. Extend, walk, or wait, Chris Hubbard.
I'm going to wait on that as well. And I'd be probably more leaning towards walk only because Chris, and listen, marvelous guy, tremendous leader in that locker room. Teammates really think highly of him. Versatile player, can play guard and tackle. Coming off an injury, the knee situation. So I would be, and especially as a guy who's getting a little longer in his career, been around a little bit, I'd probably be leaning more towards walk at this point. But listen, he's going to, he'll play a big role on that team because as we saw last year, somebody's going to get hurt and Chris Hubbard's going to have to come to the rescue again.
Can never have enough offensive linemen without question. Jadeveon Clowney brought in on a one-year deal. What do you think with him?
This is going to be fascinating, Dave, because if he ends up being the Jadeveon Clowney that we think he can be, and if he is not only a complementary piece to Myles Garrett, but makes that entire defense better, then guess what? He's going to get paid. And I don't think you're going to have any choice but to have to want to pay him. Again, depending on what they do this year. If they win the Super Bowl, that's one thing. If they come up short and he's had a huge hand in getting you to where you got, then I think you're going to have to bring him back. So I think it's going to be real interesting to see how that develops. And I think it's also going to be real interesting, Dave, to see how they use him. It's one thing to have him bookended with Myles, but, Joe Woods has got quite a weapon there. And if he puts those two guys on the same side of the field, who are you going to block? So to me, Clowney is just – that's something that's going to be an ongoing story as the season goes on. What is Jadeveon Clowney bringing to this Browns team? And, it could go beyond 1 year and it could be, who knows, it could be 6 games too. I think it's really fascinating.
We're going to stay that same position. Takk McKinley. Now, this is a guy was a first-round pick, late first-round pick. When you look at him, what are you looking at? Extend, wait, walk?
Well, I tell you, when I looked at him last week in camp, Dave, the speed just really stood out to me. This is a guy that gets off the ball quick. You wonder if a change of scenery, as we've always heard about and seen, is going to make a difference for Takk, because Takk is clearly a talented player. You wonder why he hasn't been able to hold on. Why would a team like Atlanta let that guy go? Why couldn't he, figure it out with Las Vegas? I was going to call him Oakland. He couldn't figure it out with the Raiders either. So intriguing player, but I think in terms of his future with the Browns, that would have to be a wait. Let's see what he brings you this year.
Last one we'll do this with. Anthony Walker, signed on a one-year deal. What do you think the Browns do with Anthony Walker?
Well, first of all, I think they love him because I think he brings to that linebacker room the leadership that you need. I think he's obviously a proven talent. Again, I think there's so many in terms of extensions and in terms of long-term deals that are in front of him right now. That's not to say, though, that if he shows you right away that he should be your guy long-term, that you don't get it done. But I think for the short term, I think, Dave, you got to kind of wait on that one.
Yeah, I think he's a lot like John Johnson III. They would love to find a way to get him locked up because he brings some of the same qualities to the second level that Johnson brings to the third level.
I agree with you, and I just think there's so many. There's other variables right now. There's all these there's young teammates that they want to see how they're going to develop first before they start making decisions on any of the veterans.